Hi everybody, today I am talking to Janet Alexandersson. Janet is an international contracts lawyer and she wrote the legal docs for me that I sell on the site. Now Janet is in both of my Facebook groups. She's in the open, very large VA Handbookers Facebook group and also in my private trainee only group. And recently I was talking to Janet and she said that she thought that you guys, virtual assistants, could do with some advice on negotiation. So thank you for putting aside some time to do this with me, Janet. So what was it that made you think, I think that maybe a chat about negotiation and some advice would be useful?
Well, I see people reacting quite strongly to client pushback. Mm-hmm. And I think that is part of the strength that you have as a VA, to have massive attention to detail and kind of feeling like things aren't right if something is off. Yeah. But in negotiations and with contracts, it's really two perspectives coming together to make a whole. So the fact that they are not entirely seeing your perspective or pushing back on something doesn't really mean that you've done something wrong or that there's something wrong necessarily with what you proposed. So I really wanted to explain how you can kind of merge two perspectives to get the whole that you're looking for and to kind of guard your interests while doing that.
I think sometimes as well, because the VAs come from a background where they're employed, they sometimes do think, oh my God, it's the client, therefore the client must be right and I must do everything the client wants. If they want me to work 24/7, I must adhere to that. If they want to drop my rates, then maybe I should consider that. Yeah. I think I've seen that come into play, whether or not they haven't quite got a business owner mindset yet. And so sometimes, when a client says, can you change that in the contract? Can we do this? They kind of panic.
Yeah, and also I think it's easy to slip into working for them. So yes, you can change. Yes, you can make things work. But this is you negotiating the boundaries of how you'll be working later. So kind of differentiating between those two roles, like representing yourself and working for your client.
And which areas in particular of a virtual assistant's business do you think that they would need most help with their negotiation skills?
I think defining the boundaries of what they will be doing. Mm-hmm. The actual remuneration, so what they're going to get paid, the rates, any other compensations, and then the clauses in the contract that are more general, like IP, sub-associates, associates, hours, terms, things like that, are all things that they need help with, but then also managing conflicts. So that's also something you do through negotiations. So conflict can be as easy as a tiny disagreement, but you still need to negotiate that. And I think that is also something you can manage either through contract, but you also probably have to manage throughout your relationship anyways.
When people have asked in the group about it, I know that definitely rates comes up. They want to negotiate the rates, which isn't necessarily part of the contract. It is just a discussion about, what they should charge. In the contract, sometimes you're correct. It's the associate bit that with the contract, I know that we decided to put in everything that they might need so that they could take out what they didn't need rather than not have something that they potentially might need in the future, which I think sometimes confuses them because they leave it in and the client says, oh, can you take the associate part out? So for me, that's what I wanted. At my own virtual assistant, I said, no, I don't really want you passing over work to somebody else that I don't know. At least initially. Now I've known her for some time. I know that if she did say to me, can I pass this little research bit or whatever to another person, I'll check it off. I would trust her enough. So I would maybe accept that clause now, but at the beginning of the relationship, I asked her to remove it and she was quite happy to do so as well. And the IP bit, I know that we just put, or you as the lawyer, put what you thought would be more likely that the client would own and that the VA would own. In the contract, but they can be switched. Mm-hmm. You can move them. I remember you saying once, actually, a good way to think about it is would you want that client to take that thing that you have created for them and sell it and make money from that? If the answer is no, then it belongs to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way of seeing it. And it's also, if you differentiate between the contract terms and the price, so the contract terms like the IP, what hours you're going to work, how you're going to work, what you're going to deliver, who owns what, mm-hmm. That is the negotiation part. The rate is the bargaining part.
Okay. So they're not negotiating it.
No, the rate is just bargaining. So when you're negotiating everything else in the contract, you should keep in mind what your bargain is going to be. So for example, if you are making concessions that they own all the IP, where there's might be IP that you could own, you have a bargaining chip, right?
Okay.
I
don't think that I would have even thought about it like that, let alone them, or especially a new VA. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So I would think about it that way. So if you're agreeing to extra hours in your negotiation, that means that you can raise your price in your bargaining.
Okay.
You have to link these in your client's mind for them to understand the value they're getting, right, and what you're agreeing to, so that you have more to bargain with.
Okay. And I do remember, I've seen many times, when you've answered, especially in the trainee only group, where, they've asked about a very specific point rather than more of a general point, you've repeatedly said, remember that the contract is a starting point.
Yes.
It's not actually fixed in stone, and it's yours to kind of play with, and for you and the client to decide what sort of relationship, and that it should be amended anyway for each client depending on their requirements.
Yes, and also the fact that your client is engaged and coming back and saying, can we change this? That is them communicating how they want to work with you, how they see the relationship going forward. So those are important indicators to you of how they're going to treat you and how they see your role within their business. So if they come back and they say that this is wrong, we can't use this clause, your first question to them should be why, in a kind way, just why, because asking why very openly leads them to kind of reveal what they really want or what they're afraid of, because there's usually a fear or something that they think they can gain by eliminating something.
Okay.
Allow them to explain. Even if you think you know why, ask them, because it might not be the same why as you have.
Okay.
So
just say, can you tell me what it is about that clause that...
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Or what is the reason you want to change it?
So what sort of simple strategies do you think that virtual assistants can use, to get better results in their negotiations on this?
Yes, this would be one of them, asking the why. And also the reason why I want you to ask why is because then they have to articulate to you why. And if they have a purpose that is not benevolent, if they have something nefarious going on, they'll have trouble articulating that. And what I see happening is that they usually backtrack a little because they don't want to say that out loud, that they are asking for something that's going to be super negative for you. Yeah. So they step back their request or scrap it. So you get them to kind of negotiate with themselves a little bit. So you can do that either by asking why or by staying quiet while they explain, so that you're not interjecting or getting nervous energy into the thing. So being quiet or asking why. And then if you don't get the right answer, ask why again. Like, keep repeating and just trying to understand. And that allows them to talk themselves into a circle.
Okay.
And you'll understand more about what they want, but also they will probably keep chipping away at their requests, because it feels wrong for us. Even it would feel wrong for me, it would feel wrong for you to keep restating your demands, because it is a demand, without softening the edges a little bit for most of us.
And this is something that you've seen in all your sort of years of negotiation?
This works. It works on everyone. Even in your private life, I would be sparing, but it works. So that is the main thing. And then also getting them to, if they want to change something, allow them to propose the change. So if there's a clause that they want to reword it and they're demanding that of you, it's probably feels like you have to do that, especially in the VA relationship.
Yeah.
But if they want to redraft, they know why they should provide the new wording.
Right. This is great advice, because often I think what I see with the VAs is that, especially if they're new, they automatically think, say somebody's like, how much do you charge? And sometimes they'll come straight in and go, oh, I'm £30, but I can do it cheaper. Like they immediately they didn't keep quiet, and they didn't wait until they didn't say, well, that's my rate, pause.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I've seen them say, I told them what my rate was and there was no issue. And it's like, well, of course, if you doubt your own contract, or if you doubt your own abilities or your own pricing, I wouldn't want to hire someone who wasn't even really sure if they were worth the money.
Well, if that is also your inclination, you can use, I don't remember the percentages now, but it's called the Ackerman model of negotiation. So essentially you always start above what your actual rate is, what your minimum.
Yeah.
So if your asking rate would be 100 of whatever, you start with 150.
So
that allows you to drop really quickly down to something like 120.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe you negotiate a bit more, and then you can drop to 110. And then let your actual rate be your bottom line.
Right.
So
fantastic advice.
It also means that you're probably going to catch rates that are higher than your bottom line quite often, because people don't bother to negotiate sometimes. Maybe they're happy with your higher fee. So that's also in the bargaining. I would keep it a bit higher.
Yeah.
And then you would also like to keep something in mind from the negotiation that you could have said yes to, but you just didn't. Maybe they asked for 1 hour extra a week, or they asked for a specific way of doing things that you could, but you prefer not to. Mm-hmm. That if once you're at your bottom rate, you say that this is the rate that I'm willing to give. I can't go lower than that. You know that they probably need you to go lower, but then you drop in the thing from negotiations that you didn't give them. So you say my bottom line is 100, but I'm also willing to do the extra half hour or work this particular method that you suggested. So when you're bargaining for the rate, remember that the rate is not your only bargaining chip. So bring something back that they wanted, instead of saying I can't go lower, let's not work together. Just add something that you know has leverage to them, but doesn't really matter that much to you.
God, it's gold dust. It's just gold dust. You just don't really think about it in that way, you just not, we're not used to, with our background often is admin, or just being the person that's told what to do, that accepts the terms, that we're given as an employee. So it's really interesting. I remember also once you told me about negotiation, know what it is that you want to kind of come out of the room with, have an idea of what you're willing to accept and what you won't before you enter into any negotiation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a really clear idea of how you want to work with your client is probably very good to have before you step into the negotiation part of the contract. What are the things that you cannot simply do because your insurance or your personal conditions? That's really good.
Yeah.
Then for the negotiation part, I think you should also practice. And the best way to practice is to go through everything you're subscribed to in your private life or as a business, anything you're paying for, and go to those companies and negotiate a lower rate.
Okay. God, it sounds a bit scary.
If you have been an annual customer of something, say that you still like it very much, you still want to continue, but you found this competitor that seems to be offering the same thing to a lower rate. Mm-hmm. Do they have a more competitive offer for you?
Okay.
Any of these tactics, trying that saves you a lot of money, because some of them are going to say yes, especially if they're like digital subscriptions online. They have pots to, and they're allowed to do this in many cases. So try. Okay.
So I'm going to do that today. I'm going to have a go and see what happens. Thank you for that. Now, I know in the freelancer contract bundle, there is a 4-page negotiation guide. So a lot of this is in there, in there anyway, but what's the biggest sort of takeaway, I guess, the main things that you were like, if you remember only these sort of 1, 2 or 3 things, what would they be to finalize?
First, your client is looking out for themselves. So when they are asking you for something or wanting to change something in the contract, that is only for their benefit.
Mm-hmm. Because the contract's written in favor of the VA. We specifically did that, didn't we? Yeah.
And even if it wasn't, like, they're still asking for their benefit. They're not looking out for you. Mm-hmm. So that is them asking you out. You're asking them out. And once you're in a relationship, you're both looking out for each other. And that's what the contract should be guided towards, but you have to look out for yourself first before you're in the relationship.
Okay, that's
So
fantastic.
that's the first one. And then everything is negotiable up until the point where the law says you can't, but that is very minimal. Mm-hmm. So remember that you can be as flexible as you need to get what you want. Mm-hmm. And that if you start looking at the contract as something that is more geared towards how you want to work with your client instead of I'm avoiding a lawsuit, it will become a document that serves you. So in many cases, I say law is behavior modification. And this is your chance to modify your client's behavior.
Okay.
So by setting the boundaries and expectations and how you work together, you allow them to become better clients and modify their behavior. And the intention behind the behavior modification is what you would address in a lawsuit. That is why we have law to begin with, to modify people's behaviors. So remember that that is the intention. So you might want to write something in this contract that wouldn't really be something that a court would care about, but you would. So maybe the client isn't allowed to email you on weekends.
Okay.
Like any boundary that you find necessary for you to work well together, that can be in the contract.
You can just write it in yourself.
Yes.
And it's legally binding because it's in there.
It's not necessarily legally binding, but it's going to feel binding towards your client. So you can add that to your appendix or your attachment and say, this is how we are going to work together. This is how the collaboration is. These are how we're available to each other. All these things that actually matter that a contract wouldn't normally display in a legally binding way, you can still include as your intention of how you are going to work together.
Because sometimes occasionally somebody has said, oh, well, I might want to raise my rates later. It's not in the contract. And it's like, we'll put it in. You literally we couldn't put in every single thing in the world without it being a massive, massive contract. But it's still okay for them to write that in if they want to, that they, reserve the right to raise their rates.
But even if they don't write that in, they have the right to end that contract and raise their rates for a future. They can still make that request.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be in the contract. I think some people think if it's not in the contract, they can't do it, or if, they're quite fixed minded with it. I think the VAs sometimes, because we're quite detail, people like that.
If you feel like these things shouldn't be in your contract, you can add another appendix and call that working relationship or something like that. So list every way that you're going to use these types of emails, these email clients, these are the hours, like the very nitty-gritty that really doesn't belong in the contract, but is important for you to know how you're supposed to deal with the client and letting the client know your boundaries. So
would you put that in the contract bit or just in the terms, your terms at the end? Would that be okay there?
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah.
Because also I think you're right, knowing you need to be able to work with somebody that you like, and sometimes how people react over the contract and how they behave towards you. Sometimes you're like, do I really want to work with this person if they're going to behave like a bit of a dick on, a particular clause that you're like, why are they doing that? Why is it? And like you said, it's a good indicator of what that client is going to be like and that working relationship.
Yeah. And I think they're operating from the same place as you are. It's scary to sign a contract. It's something they're afraid of. That's why they're pushing back. You need to find out what they're afraid of. And a way to assure them that that is not going to come to pass, maybe that is by changing the language, but sometimes it's just like having it out in the open.
Right. Yeah. That's really good advice. And then also, like you said, if they do want to change something, ask them why, and then ask them to word it, to tell you what it is that they want it, rather than you thinking that it's something that you have to procure for them. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Janet. Really, really good advice. And thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.